Alright, YouTube, I thought I'd talk specifically about why I'm not concerned about Russia. On one level, of course, at the grand chessboard level, yeah, their main foe on the world stage. They've got the other large nuclear stockpile. I don't think anybody worries about the UK or France suddenly hauling off and firing nuclear weapons at the US. And of course, India, Pakistan, and North Korea don't have a delivery mechanism necessary to actually use their nuclear weapons outside of their own general regions. North Korea can send a nuclear missile as far as maybe Japan, and even that's questionable, honestly, with their missile tech being as it is. Pakistan and India have a couple decades to go before they'll have miniaturization at all. They're using sort of early era atomic weapons, early 50s era sort of tech, maybe some boosted weapons in time, and that's about all they have. But I'm not particularly. The thing I would say is this: no Russian, as far as I know, has ever personally screwed me over. I look at the population of Russia, I have nothing against them. I don't care what they choose to do in their nation. I do think Putin is a tinhorn. That's fairly clear. He's just an oligarch with a cult of personality. Because he happens to have charisma, people have developed this weird imagery of him as some sort of special god man against globalism, when in reality, if you look at Uranium One or anything like that, yeah, he's fully involved with the globalists. These days, it's almost China that has its own interior system large enough to challenge the West, as opposed to Russia, which is kind of mixed between having its own sphere and wanting to be part of that larger world pie or something like that. But I don't lose sleep at night worrying about the Russians. I see the inevitability in the future of a nuclear conflict in this world. Whether or not, again, it involves Russia. It could involve maybe India and Pakistan develop their next tier of weapons, nuke each other. China gets involved and we end up having to get involved. Maybe Russia sits that one out. We don't know. Could be China, could be some Israel-Saudi conflict, Israel-Pakistan, Israel-Iran conflict. Israel would be a prime flashpoint. It could be something on the Korean Peninsula where China and the US are both involved. Or then again, it could be, again, the NATO versus Russia and some of its allies and so forth. I see that as inevitable, but I don't lose sleep over it. The reason being, the US media, the legacy media, typically it makes the average normal individual within the mainstream worry about things that aren't actually things to be worried about, while ignoring things that are. So when I see them inordinately worried about Russian cyber intrusion, Russian hacking into the election, Russia, cocked Trump or something like that, I say, if the legacy media is reporting on that in a feverish manner, that is, they seem obsessed with it, then it's obvious that it's not something to actually be worried about, because it's just clickbait. It's just fear-mongering in order to drive more sales of their product, which is ad revenue, basically, online, or ad revenue through commercials on TV. That's the reason for their existence. I've spoken of this before. That's their Achilles heel. The Achilles heel of the legacy media is that they have no choice but to provide clickbait. Otherwise, they get outcompeted by news networks that are doing that. It's actually funny when I see people talking about, oh, fake news needs to be suppressed. If you want fake news, you're watching CNN or Fox or MSNBC or something like that. They don't report 99% of what they talk about isn't the news. The news is, oh, there was an earthquake here. Oh, there's been a conflict here. Blah, blah, blah. All the rest that they're talking about, all the analysis where they drag a bunch of guests that don't even know what they're talking about half the time up on there to be talking heads with them and talk about the ramifications or the fallout of something. Half the time it's not true in any measure. The other half of the time it's at most a biased approach that's coincidentally true down the line. You saw, for instance, the media conducting all their polling during the election. Was it correct? 99% of the time, no. It was completely overestimating support for Hillary Clinton. It was not correct. It didn't even look at the battleground states primarily, which is another reason why they were so wrong. And so they were morons. They didn't know what they were talking about. So that's continued. When I see them worrying inordinately about, oh, Putin hacked the election, Russia is spreading fake news. No, I think what's actually happening is the legacy media feels very threatened because they realize they're beginning to die out at a rapid pace. Therefore, they're seeking to use the internet giants to suppress all of the upstart organizations that are providing the actual real news. And some of it is clickbait. You look at again, you look at Before It's News or like conservative outfitters. Now, Drudge reposts their material sometimes, but other times you won't see that echoed in even the right-wing alternative media. You'd think of Breitbart, The Blaze, Drudge, because it's hit or miss as to whether it's even sourced properly. A lot of times when I see people telling me something has occurred, I can find no corroboration that it has actually occurred, regardless of what media site they happen to be using. Therefore, I am intrinsically distrustful of any story I see posted until it's corroborated by a source that is relevant, or by multiple sources, regardless of relevance. For instance, if Breitbart and ABC News and RT and BBC are all reporting that the same event has happened, let's say the death of Castro, I'm going to say, okay, well, Castro is dead. But if I see just a report on one of these groups, and within the first hour or two there's no corroboration anywhere that it's actually true, if they had said, oh, Castro's dead on AP and nobody else was reporting on it, I would say, well, maybe he's not actually dead, maybe this is a rumor, and they're reporting on it as it's true, as though it's true. And this happens all the time in the media. You saw this, again, with the presidential polling. It was all over the place. The Brexit polling, the British media did the same thing. Oh, yeah, Brexit will fail. And it didn't fail, of course, it went through. We see this all the time. Now, I'm not saying that Russian media is any better, or that the state of Russia under its current leadership is any better than the West. I'm not saying that at all. In some ways, it's actually worse. You look at RT. It's the same sort of fudgy news service that you would find in the United States. It's the same thing. The fact that they helpfully put it in English and let people in the West consume it, that doesn't mean it's actually accurate. And there's bias and spin there too. The state of Russia has a specific biased line that it wants to push, which is Russia is blameless, Putin is great, and the Western leaders are one part inept, one part corrupt. Western people don't really know what's going on. We're the legitimate news service. Now, a few years ago, that may have been more true. Now, though, RT is becoming more and more biased as well. I would point out this is even the case, by the way, in the Western media. When you see that most of the lamestream legacy media outlets detest Trump, they are making no effort whatsoever to actually report on what he's doing. Most of it is just a bunch of spin about what he's doing. That's true. But what are Breitbart and similar groups doing? They unquestioningly talk about his virtues, never criticize, with the exception of Romney for Secretary of State, which is why, thankfully, I don't think that's actually going to happen. I honestly, Bolton wouldn't be much better. Hopefully he goes with, again, a Jim Webb, Michael Flynn, somebody like that, or maybe a Giuliani. That's at least tolerable compared to Bolton or Romney. But they almost unquestioningly assume that whatever he says or does is virtuous, that he's some sort of God-man, and it roughly echoes what we've seen with RT now. The legacy media has done the same thing for Obama. All the CNNs and MSNBCs and so forth fawned over him. Could do no wrong. Nothing he did could ever be criticized because he was a Democrat, he was black, and also he's younger and well-spoken. The fact that Trump is not a Democrat, the fact that Trump is also a fucking white male, as they might term it in the social justice warrior circles, means he's not going to get much favorable coverage, even after the inauguration. Some of these groups will extend a little bit of an olive branch. They'll probably immediately pull it back, though, because he's not going to play their game and might not want to talk to them at all. He's obviously making inroads into talking to the establishment Republicans and even some of the more tolerable Democrats that have a few marbles left in their heads. Will he extend that far enough to actually have a friendly conversation with Anderson Cooper? Maybe not. Maybe that time is past. It'll take some time before we're going to get any fair reporting at all. What have they talked about lately? On the one hand, they attack him for being too fast with his transition team. Oh, he's not taking enough time to consider these people. Things are moving too swiftly. And then the next day they're reporting on, oh, this process is so slow. He's so far behind. He has no clue what he's doing. He's inept. So make up your mind. These are two things that can't coexist exactly in any sane realm of human endeavor. But as far as Russia goes, I don't lose any sleep over Russia. I'm not concerned about them hacking the elections. If we were really worried about Russia hacking the US election, as in actually hacking vote tallying machines, just switch to paper ballots only. It's as simple as that. That's what we should be doing anyway. We should be worried about the possibility that there's going to be screwy shit going on in our elections here domestically. We saw it like in Florida with the butterfly ballots and pregnant chads, dimpled chads, hanging chads, and so forth. We've seen this before. We have enough problems with our elections already going smoothly within the United States. There are always a few scattered reports that a voting machine is broken down, a ballot is confusing, someone's been left off a ballot, they ran out of ballots, a polling place was unexpectedly moved, voter ID bullcrap, dead people voting, whatever it happens to be. We hear reports of this every election, including in the midterms. I am not worried about some distant foreign power hacking our elections. I'm just not worried about that. I'm much more concerned with the fact that people within the United States, U.S. citizens, especially people involved in business and politics, might get their hands dirty doing a little bit of electoral fraud here. That's what would worry me about our elections. It's rather unfortunate because we could avoid this largely altogether. Print the ballots up in secret, don't publicly disclose them until there's too little time before the election for them to ever be copied and forged and, have some stuffing in the ballot box. Paper only, no electronic voting machines. You got a power outage, don't sweat it. You can still file your paper ballots. Everything is hand counted. If it's within a certain margin, locally or on a state level, it gets automatically recounted. It's as simple as that. We used that sort of system for 200 years. It seemed to work fine. We've got machines now that can print all the ballots out. You don't have to worry just because it's not on a screen, stored in a data bank somewhere. It's not necessary to worry about Russian incursions into an election system where some of these states are moving away from even allowing you to request a paper ballot. That's what worries me. It worries me that some particularly skilled group of very politically aware hackers might decide to screw with the election system. I'm not so worried about some Russian espionage agent playing spy versus spy and doing the same thing. It's like I would be much more worried about some militant group armed by the U.S. obtaining nuclear materials and setting off a dirty bomb than I am an actual nuclear war with Russia or even with China or something like that. I realize it will probably happen in the future. It could very well happen within my lifetime. I'm fully aware of that fact. I'm aware that most people have a severe illogical bias against thinking that it's possible because they haven't observed it having happened before. They don't seem to realize we're not that far into the nuclear age, the atomic age. We haven't had these weapons for very long, let alone enough of them to debilitate the entire world, let alone more than a bipolar world with just two warring nuclear states. Now we have their respective sort of nuclear vassals. The U.S. has the U.K. and France. Russia has China. India and Pakistan are sort of like free agents, lesser nuclear powers. We've got Saudi Arabia with atomic weapons on short order from Pakistan. Israel is a rogue state, hasn't even signed the NPT. North Korea is the same thing. They're basically China's Israel. We've got a much more convoluted arrangement now than we had 50 years ago. And people still act like it's impossible. Well, no, nothing's impossible, so don't discount that possibility. But ultimately, we're probably, unfortunately, at some point, we're probably going to see radiological terrorism before we see any sort of actual nuclear war. Unfortunately, nuclear materials go missing all the time, including here in the U.S. Oh, there's a rod missing from this spent fuel pool. I wonder who could have possibly misplaced it. Could it have been somebody who's going to sell that fuel rod for a couple $1 million to some fucking group like Al-Qaeda? Yeah, probably. Who knows what they'll attack? Maybe they'll false flag Mecca, just get the whole Islamic world really stirred up. That's unfortunately a possibility too. Unfortunately, yeah, that's more likely. I would think the ramifications of a dirty bomb being set off are way worse than the idea of getting nuked, honestly. Massive contamination, the general prevailing feeling of, oh, this could happen anywhere. It doesn't even require the technology necessary to literally make an atomic weapon. It would terrify everybody in the world. It'd practically shutter the entire world economy for some time. People would be in an absolute panic. More than if a nuclear weapon, if like Russia returned to above ground nuclear testing, like, screw the test ban treaty and all that shit. We're just going to set off a couple of these Satan missiles, really show the world what we're made of. Yeah, that'd probably get people a little paranoid, but ultimately it's a logical actor on the world stage, one that has an economy, has millions and millions of people that would die in a nuclear exchange. The terrorist group, on the other hand, they're like, we're setting it off on foreign soil. I'm not even worried about it. So they construct their weapon or whatever, they deliver it, they blow it up. No ramifications to any significant degree. Half these people are already being bombed anyway. We look at ISIS. They did obtain some low-grade nuclear material in Iraq. Unfortunately, it still hasn't been fully accounted for, which means they probably still got it. Now, hopefully they just gave themselves bone cancer handling this stuff because they're too fucking stupid to know that you have to have, the lead-lined container to carry it around in. Hopefully they gave themselves leukemia and keeled over, and there's like a pile of ISIS skeletons somewhere in the desert with a truck full of radiologically contaminated materials. But we don't have a guarantee that that's the actual case. It's much more concerning than the idea of, Russia presses the button. Yeah, it probably will in the future, but that could be 200-300 years from now. Maybe we've got a lot longer to go before that happens. Meanwhile, these other groups, they don't care if they nuke you. If they had nuclear weapons, they'd press the button instantly. They wouldn't even hesitate because that's their goal. They'd say, wow, this is going to be great. All the other militants on Earth will be paying us to try to obtain more of this material because we're the first ones to successfully do so. They'd be getting money from Boko Haram. They'd certainly be getting, if it was ISIS doing it, Al-Qaeda would bend over and join them in a minute. And they'd become the only major militant force in the world. They'd blend into the population. They could operate at a whim. No, I'm not worried about the Russians so much as I'd be worried about that. I might worry more about North Korea if they actually had miniaturization. It's like they've conducted, I think, 5 nuclear tests now. One of them fizzled out, and then 3 were extremely primitive. We're talking, pre-Fat Man designs, like Trinity-level designs. And then the latest one is kind of sort of about the same size, maybe, as the one we dropped on Nagasaki, which is to say we had that tech back in the 40s. They got quite a ways to go before they're going to be able to actually mount any of this shit on a missile, let alone the kind that's fielded by a sub. Yeah, maybe 50 years from now, maybe they'll develop boosted weapons or something like that, but probably their regime will collapse before then. I'm not too worried about them. India and Pakistan would be the only major flashpoint I'd worry about. Because at any given point over Kashmiri province, especially with China, with some degree of land there that they as well claim, you could have a 3-way nuclear conflict there. Now, that would debilitate all of Southeast Asia. There goes a large proportion, by the way, of the world's agricultural economy. It would starve a lot of people in other parts of the world. A lot of your cheap consumer goods would go the way of the dinosaur, too. You'd have, 500 million dead Chinese people and 500 million dead Indians and a couple 100 million dead Pakistanis. Yeah, it'd be a regular Holocaust. So that would be the one I'd worry about more, maybe, than Russia going crazy. That's about all. Peace out.